welcome to the next episode of On My Studio Table. I'm so glad you could come and join me, and I'm very excited to share with you some really interesting things, or things I hope you will find interesting. First of all, the latest eco-dyeing and printing that I've done has just turned out so well. 3 pieces are hanging behind me. They are vintage wool from Vintage Wool Blanket, and I did another piece as well, which I'll show you a bit later. These are long pieces, so they are pretty much doubled over the hangers that they're hanging on. And I do this because these are 2 cans or 1 can wide. You probably know that I use Rustic cans to wrap my bundles in for the eco-printing process. And the width of the fabric is usually determined by the number of cans that I want to put in the bundle. I only wanted to put 2 in these bundles, or the middle one just 1, because I wanted to do them in a pan on the stove rather than in my big boiler, which is outside. And the Rustic cans actually turned it into a kind of a dirty pot. And you've heard me mention that before. And that's a kind of pot where you keep the dye liquid going. You just keep topping it up as it evaporates. And it usually has had some element of rust in it. Mine comes from the Rustic cans that I use. I don't put any extra iron in the liquid to make it a dirty pot. So I've also done some silk, and I did some papers as well. For my eco printing, I usually go for a walk to forage the leaves that I use. So my husband and I did go for a walk on Sunday afternoon, and we combine being outside and having a bit of exercise with collecting foliage. And I often take photos because it's often really beautiful, no matter what time of day or whether it's sunny or not. I think that's the thing about nature, it has all different moods. So you'll be seeing some of them being interspersed in between the different parts of this video. I used a variety of papers for my latest eco-printing session, and some of them might surprise you. Some you'll be familiar with if you've been watching my previous videos. They're papers that I'm really enjoying using, and possibly some are not strictly papers. So this is Cardi paper, printed with eucalyptus and blackwood leaves, and then the back I've also used onion skin, so that's what the orange and yellow spots are from. Again, eucalyptus and blackwood and a little bit of lamandra or lamandra. And the back. Now we're coming to canvas. These are from Canvas art pads, and they're gessoed canvas. And you might remember from an earlier video, I was really surprised at how well they printed. So I'm going to keep doing it. So this is eucalyptus, lamandra and bracken fern. It didn't do a lot on the back, so it must be to do with which side is coated. And this side feels like it has the gesso coating. Another piece of canvas. Sometimes they get folded over in the rolling up process, so you get these little lines, but I quite like that. A little bit of Rustic can print, eucalyptus there, and blackwood. Not sure if there's onion skin there. There might be a little bit there. This one's paler because it was more inside the bundle where the pot liquid couldn't get to it, and it wasn't near one of the Rustic cans. But it's still a lovely subtle print, mainly eucalyptus on that one. This is a larger piece of canvas. When we were away last week, I went into a shop and they had these A4 sized art pads with canvas sheets, so I bought one of those. And that has bracken fern, eucalyptus, and I can't really see what else. Oh, that might be a plant that we didn't know what it was, and it didn't print all that well. and especially on cloth it didn't print very well. And of course the tie marks, which I really love. And this one is almost totally tie marks. This is watercolour paper. And I'll have to show you the back. And interesting. Now this was a paper that I hadn't tried before, and you might be surprised that it would work. This was a Canson type of vellum, I think. It didn't have anything on the packet. This was in a pile of papers that were given to me, but it's like a vellum and it's partially see-through. So if I held it up to the light, you would see the light through it. And I thought this would be fantastic for in journals, especially if you wanted a hint of the next page to show through. This one ended up very dark because it was near the Rustic can, but you can still see through it. I'm hoping that's showing up on camera. Rustic can marks and blackberry leaf there, and a bit of blackwood leaf and a bit of onion skin. The blackberry leaves, because we're in early summer, are a little bit too fresh, so I didn't pick very many of them, but it still worked. This is the thin card that I really like to use. I've used some watercolour and some thin card, and I can't tell by the feel of them which is which. So this has eucalyptus leaves mostly, some lamandra, a little bit of onion skin where the orangey yellow spots are. And then the back, and that has some lamandra as well, and a variety of leaves. And I really like both sides. This is why they're so good when you're making journals or books, because all the pages are interesting. For the first time I tried what I think is tea tree, and that had little kind of nuts on it. I don't know if that's what they are, little seed type things, or maybe buds for flowers, I'm not sure. Very hard little cases, and they actually printed quite well as a resist, and so did the leaves. The leaves are very fine, so they were a bit of a pain to wipe off afterwards. Eucalyptus, onion and blackwood, and then on the back a much paler result, but still lovely. And this one again, similar leaves, bit of bracken fern, eucalyptus and onion skins, and then the back has a blackberry leaf as well, just a pale print, a pale green. This is the unknown plant. It just prints a very pale imprint, so it might work better if there's more iron in it. I'll have to try that. And this piece of paper, you can tell where the paper that was on top of it ended, and this was against something else. So a bit of bracken fern, eucalyptus, and some more eucalyptus and onion skin, and then the back, that's a bit less distinct. These were perhaps the most surprising and intriguing of all the eco-printing results that I did the other day. This is actually a packet from tea bags, and I divided it up so that I could fit it in the bundles, or fit them in the bundles, and I just love the result. So this was the blank side of the packaging, and I'll just turn it over, and the other side isn't very interesting in a moment, but it just goes to show that you can try all different sorts of papers and you'll get very different results. These seem to be quite a bit brighter. I don't know if it's to do with what's in the paper. I have no idea, or the cardboard, I should say. But look how the bracken fern printed, really beautifully clear. And then the eucalyptus, instead of being orange, is yellow. The onion skins are the usual orange and yellow. And then a little bit of darkness from the rusty cans and the string lines. So just really lovely results. And then the other side, if I just show you, that's just the packaging, and that's grunged it up a lot, but I can certainly use these as collage on cards or covers of journals or anything. Really happy with how they turned out. So I don't think I'll be throwing out the packaging even into the recycling anymore. I think I'll be keeping it if it's got a blank side on it. if the results are going to be like this. Vintage wool is so lovely to work with, and the leaves from the trees that grow near our house just printed such a beautiful orange. This is one variety of eucalyptus, and this is another one which is a bit paler. These leaves I thought were too new to use, but I thought I would just try a few because they usually work better when they're a bit older. We've had a lot of rain, so there's a lot of new growth, and the new leaves will sometimes disintegrate and make a terrible mush on the fabric. But they did work really, really well, and they were easy to take off, which I was really pleased about. And this was near the Rustic can in the bundle, and I'm really happy with how that turned out. And if I turn it over, you can see that it's reversible like most of my pieces, but it also has the original label. So I'll just turn it around. So this is from the blanket, and it was made by Waverley Mills, which are based in Launceston, Tasmania. This mill was established in 1874, and it is still going, which is really wonderful. And it says, the best for rest, Waverley 100% pure wool blanket, super coloured, made in Australia. It would be at least 50 years old, I would say. This was a long strip that was 1 can wide that you saw hanging on the cupboard, and the bracken fern has printed in a very subtle pattern there. And then you've got the orange here, I'll just move it along, from the eucalyptus leaves, same variety as what I showed you on the other piece, pardon me. And if I just turn it over, this is the part that was near the rustic can, and it's quite dark and then it grades to light. And the other side is also interesting. And I love the way the stems of the leaves actually imprint into the wool. And if I just move it along, you'll see some of the orange leaves. So that's the same leaf as these, but it didn't print as orange in that spot there. And then it gradually gets darker and darker. And then you see the can prints at this end. So this is the other variety that I used of eucalyptus leaves. It has the pointy leaves that are opposite each other. And I just love how this all looks. This is another piece of wool. I had 2 cans in the bundle, so they were end to end. I cut the bottoms out so that the water passes right through. And again, it grades from dark to light. And you can see a very faint border here because I had a piece of paper on top of the cloth when it was in the bundle. I'll just turn it over. I also added a bracken fern branch, I guess you could call it, frond, onto the outside of the bundle. So you've got the string lines, but then you've also got the bracken fern, which worked as a resist. So that's a lovely detail on there. And again, the edge of the paper that was on here meant there's a kind of a border. And then some more orange. So again, a reversible piece of wool, and some more orange prints at the bottom there, or the top, whichever way it goes. This is my business card, but I also use it for my tags, and I write on the back what it's been eco-printed with, what kind of fabric it is and how to wash it, and the size and so on. I've just listed all of these pieces of wool on my online shop. My fabrics usually go fast, so if you want one, you'll need to be quick. They're great for inspiring your textile art or whatever other use you might want to put it to. This one is really lovely. I really love this piece. I think it's possibly my favourite one out of the batch that I did. And here we have very dark eucalyptus leaves because of the rusty can, and a bit of lamandra there, which doesn't show up very much. That's a little bit of tea tree, and of course the eucalyptus and a bit of onion skin. I'll just turn it over. More tea tree, eucalyptus, and I think that's the unknown plant. And then if I show you the other side, eucalyptus in a very dark print, and then brighter and lighter, and again a bit of a border because of the paper that was rolled up in the bundle. That's blackwood. Sometimes that will print green, but in this case it printed more as a resistor, pale orange kind of colour. And there's the fern print again. So that's the wool fabric. I also did some silk, so this was also included in the bundles. And if you've been watching my videos, you'll know that I save cardboard rolls from things like baking paper and foil and so on. So I've got two together on this roll, and I'll just unroll it, starting with the string line's end. And this one, the border is very pronounced because of the paper that was in the layers. It almost looks like the paper's been torn, but I think it's more that it got a bit folded as it was rolled up. But I really love that effect. And I don't know if you can see that on camera, but there is a weave in this silk. It's vintage silk. I think it may have been a tablecloth. It was all hemmed around the edges, a big rectangle. It was given to me by my textile artist friend who passed away a couple of months ago. And I just love using what she's given me. And then if I turn it over, see it's fairly similar on the back, I think because the silk is quite thin. It's not flimsy, but it is quite thin. You can see a little bit of lamandra there, but the rest is more like a complex art print. There's a bit of eucalyptus and a little bit of bracken fern. And then the next piece, let's put that over there, is quite different. This was in a different bundle. And onion skins, eucalyptus leaves, and the rusty can print. I think that's blackwood there. Blackwood is a type of acacia, and the timber is absolutely beautiful. We have some antique furniture which we bought when it was not valued and just sold as second-hand. Absolutely beautiful timber. It grows a lot in Tasmania, and we have some on our property as well, as you can see. So that's blackwood there, the leaves, a bit of lamandra, some eucalyptus, a bit more eucalyptus. Not sure, there's something there, might be in the tea tree. And again, you might be able to see the weave, and this silk is quite shimmery. So when I photographed it for the online shop, it was difficult to photograph in a way that looks like the real thing. But hopefully I've done it well enough so you can see what it's like. And again, eucalyptus leaves, onion skins, and that lovely pattern that's woven through. And that's a bit of blackberry leaf there. So as I said, I didn't use much because it was a bit young, but it's still printed quite well. The seams are still on it, the hems, and I've left them on it just to show part of its history. So if you're interested in any of these fabrics, they are listed at gonerustic.com, and I do ship anywhere in the world. I've had a couple of people have difficulties with the shipping, so just let me know if you're having problems and we'll try and fix it. Sometimes all you need to do is refresh the browser page before you do your checkout. So hopefully there won't be any issues. I have been doing this for quite a few years, so and I have, as I said, posted all over the world. So maybe one of these will be your next project. One of the lovely things about this time of year in Tasmania is that it's early summer and my roses have started to bloom. A really special one is a moss rose, which is quite an old variety. It was given to me years ago, and it usually blooms once a year. However, the last 2 years it hasn't bloomed at all, and I think it's possibly because I wasn't really looking after it as well as I should have. And it is blooming now, and it is covered in blooms. It's actually bloomed a bit more since I took the photo that I'm sharing with you. I hope to have a rose garden at some point, but we'll have to protect it from wallabies and possums if I'm going to have any plants at all. A journal that I'm currently working on, which I have shared about on Facebook and so on and hinted at in my last video, is really coming along. It's supposed to be a long-term project, but it's actually becoming something that I'm working on every day and probably will be finished sooner rather than later. But I guess that gives me an excuse to make another one. I used eco-printed papers from my previous eco-printing session, plus some of the fabrics as well, and then I've added other things. It has a theme. I'm not going to tell you what that is. I will explain how I'm making the journal, but I'm not going to actually say what the theme is. You might be able to guess, so you might like to comment with your guess at what the theme might be. This is the new journal that I've been working on, and as you know, I do enjoy working in the group that Kathryn Chambers runs on Facebook and also via her YouTube channel. And one of the new projects that we're doing is to make a journal, an art journal. And so I started, there's only been 2 episodes so far I've started, but I may have run on ahead because I've just enjoyed it so much and I think I'm on a bit of a roll with it. And I think when the mood strikes you, you've just got to run with it because the ideas are there and it just flows. So the cover I'll just start with first. The cover has paper which I've taken from a Japanese ledger, a vintage one that I bought from the Thread Studio in Western Australia. The ledger was actually coming apart, and so I used the papers from the cover to recover this one. This is an actual old book cover from an old hymn book actually, but it was the wrong colour for what I wanted. It was red and I wanted more earthy tones, which is what I usually go for, and so it was just the right kind of paper, and it was quite a strong paper as well. This is a piece that I made as part of our year-long stitching project which didn't end up going into my journal. So I decided to use this on the cover, and it already had a flap on it. And so when you lift the flap, it says Allegro and then Dolce, which I think is how you pronounce it. And these are words that are used in music. Allegro means fast and Dolce means slow or with a measured pace. It could also mean quiet, but I can't quite remember. So that's a clue really about the theme of this book. And the theme isn't music, although I am cross-referencing with music and musical terms through the journal. The feather is one that I picked up, and I've stitched it on using a very big cross stitch because I didn't want to damage the fine hairs on the quill of the feather. This little label with my name on it actually was used when I did an eco-printing workshop, and we all had labels like this with permanent pen tied onto our bundles so we wouldn't get mixed up as to whose was what. I've used a mixture of paper and wool, and I think that's cotton there, And this is linen, and they've been eco-printed, including the paper. These are sticks I picked up off the ground, and then I've just used some simple stitching. I did use double-sided archival tape to attach these, and I stitched them before I attached them because it would be difficult to stitch through once they were stuck on. I stitched through the paper as well, so the cover was all finished pretty much by the time I was ready to put it on. And when I take the cover off, you'll see that it hasn't got any lining inside. That's going to come later. I have, I think, 4 signatures, and I'm doing as much stitching as I can until it's time to put it together, and then anything that I add to it will have the stitching done before it gets adhered into the journal. So this is eco-printed paper. This is a scrap from previous collage projects, and I don't throw anything away, as you know. That's a lingerie adjuster, and this is a piece of vintage silk. One of the things we did in the slow stitching journal was a gathered piece of cloth, and then we embroidered on it, similar to smocking but a more freeform version. And I really liked the pieces before the embroidery was added. So I actually didn't use a couple of them in the artworks that I made with them. So I decided to put them in the journal. And again, this is a clue as to what this is about. Piece of eco-dyed cloth. If you watched my last video, you would have seen that I did these luggage labels and eco-printed card. This is a bread tag. And what intrigues me is that the bread companies are still storing the bread in plastic bags, but in a nod to being eco-friendly, they've changed from plastic tags to cardboard tags because they're more biodegradable. But it doesn't fix the problem of the plastic bags. So it's a bit of a paradox to me. This is a piece of linen, and it's a sample, which you would have seen in my last video. And this also, it's an unbleached coffee filter. There is a word that I haven't stitched yet on cardi paper. And this was a torn piece out of one of the papers. It had got damaged in the eco-printing process. So I've glued and stitched that on. That's the inside of a peg. And that's also connected to clothing, which you'll see appears quite often in this journal. And then we're getting to the end of the signature. And more stitching and torn piece of vintage paper, and these letters I've stamped with my letter stamps onto the margins of the music sheets that I've used. And it's a lovely colour. It looks like it's been tea dyed, but it's actually that colour because of its age. I'm also letting the stitching show on the back of the pages because I think that shows an honesty and a transparency which I really like about my process. This is over 100 years old. Someone gave me a damaged journal which was put out by Madame Weigel, an Australian entrepreneur in the late 1800s. She did amazing things in her business, and one of the main things that she did was she designed fashion and made patterns out of them so that people in Australia who didn't get access to clothing so easily from Europe and the United States could make their own clothes and still be very stylish. So that's what this journal was about, and it had lots of examples of the sorts of patterns you could buy and the pattern numbers. There's a wonderful documentary about her, which I'll put a link to in the description. That's the end of that signature. Now this is the next signature, again, a leftover from another project. And this is a squashed bottle cap that I picked up off the road, and another piece of the vintage silk that I showed you before. This is from the cover, I think, of Madame Weigel's journal. And the paper was quite fragile, so I've actually doubled it up on this. And you can see part of the cover here. This is the outside actually, and that's the inside. And I really love the designs very much of the time. This is another smocked piece, freeform smocked, and a piece of lace that I rust dyed years ago, and I've been using little bits of it from time to time. This is a rather special piece of fabric. It's just cotton interlock, but it was dyed by a wonderful online friend called Michelle in the UK. And when I was going through cancer treatment, she sent me a bundle of fabrics, and this was in that bundle. I've used a lot of it up, but this is one of the pieces that still remains. So that's a very special piece to me. This is a piece from Madame Weigel's journal. Some of it tore because it was so fragile, so I actually tore it a bit more and then stitched it as if it was being mended. And I've stamped the word refashion with re in brackets. This is khadi paper. This was brown paper from a sketchbook, quite a strong one, and a scrap from my scrap bag of eco-printed papers, and I've just done some simple stitching. This is a word from the sheet music that I had, and a page number. And I really like the way touch and hold come together between those two pages. Another cutout. So this is the outside of circles that I cut, and I think they were the circles I cut for the hexagon embellishments that I did on the journals and cards that I shared with you in a previous video. Another luggage label, and this was found in a house that we rented, and I think it was just in a box of things that the owners collected out of the house and asked me if I would like them, and so I said yes. So it has praying hands on it, and then on the back it has the Serenity prayer, which is a beautiful prayer, and I'll link to that also in the description. It's a little bit heavy, so I need to be a little bit careful, but this is quite strong. It has a clip so I can actually take it off, and it has a kind of a woven chain on it, which I really like. As you can see, I've used onion skins as well, and the labels, which I explained last time, actually made a print on the paper when they were in the bundle. Little bit of sheet music that I cut out and put on there. And this had a tear in it, so I've actually glued a patch over it out of paper and stitched it, and then I put this from the top of a piece of sheet music on there as well. I've used a variety of adhesives. I've used white glue, which is a PVA glue. I've used a glue stick, a UHU stick, some people call it Uhu, which I find is one of the best glue sticks to use. And there's the rest of Madame Weigel's cover, and the word powerful. So I wonder what ideas you have about what my theme might be. This is the cover of a music book that I use mostly in this journal by Carl Czerny. And when I was learning piano when I was young, I learned exercises that he had written, but he also made them really pretty tunes to play. So they exercised your fingers and built up your muscle memory, but they also were lovely to play. And this edition, it was a bit damaged and it's very old, and it's called School of Velocity. And velocity, of course, means fast or speed. This piece shows a really good rustic handprints, and then I've added a little piece from the cover paper. It's an offcut, and put protected with the ED in brackets. And these are offcuts from tea bags. Some of them are glued at the ends, and you need to cut them off to be able to get the tea out of the tea bags. A little bit more fabric, and this is a really fine cotton lawn. Another scrap, and I've kept the scraps the size they are, and some stitching. A linen sample. Another one of these circles, and the word tempo stamped in there, and tempo also means speed. The word strength from the top of a music page, and there's Allegro again. And here's another piece of smocking, which is wool, and the word free stamped on a torn off piece of paper. I didn't want to cover up the eco printing too much, so that's why some of these might look a bit sparse, but I don't want to cover everything. And again, the stitching showing on the back, and this was a cover from a Cardi paper book. I used the book as a journal in my slow stitching project. And this folds out, so I may add something in there. Not sure what yet. There's velocity, exclamation, question, and exclamation marks. And all the circles are not complete. And then at the end, I've pasted in one of the larger illustrations from Madame Weigel's journal, and a little bit tore off, which said skirt, so I stuck that back on over the top. So this is the last signature, another bread tag, and a little piece of the vintage silk, another tea bag, and the word altering, which has a few different meanings. We often relate it to clothing, but it can be applied to a lot of things. And here I've put a few words which were taken out of the sheet music. Performance, prescribed, and has to be. Prescribed and has to be, I think, are connected. And then a page number with a cross on it. And there's the Carl Zerny cover, or part of it. Opus 299, and it's an Australian publication. Another linen sample. These are the threads from the Japanese journal that I took the cover papers from. So I didn't want to throw them away because they're connected to what I used to make this journal. So I just bunched them up and stitched them on. They were broken and they were very fragile, and they tore as I took them out. It was already partially unbound because of that. And I really liked the holes on the edge of the paper that was out of the sketchbook too. Another one of the luggage labels that I eco-printed, and the word make. And I made a little fold-out page for this one. And there's another one of the dresses from Madame Weigel's journal, and a little bit of a description about the pattern and how you sew it. And another example of one of her patterns. And I just love them. I just think they're so beautiful. And this was words taken out of some of the sheet music. This study played in the rendering of passages. And it was a much longer sentence, but I've shortened it. I should say there's a tea bag there too, of course. And because this paper was fragile, I had to double it over, so that's why this is upside down. But I think that just adds an intriguing element to the page. Then you open that up, and there's another piece of sheet music and some stitching, and 3 tea bag ends stitched on, and a little bit of sheet music with a cross stitched on it. And this has a squashed bottle cap, much rustier than the other one, another one of the bread tags, and the word together. And the back of the other part of the page from the Carl Zerny piano exercise book. And this is the back cover, and when I took the paper from the Japanese ledger, there was this bit of Japanese writing on it, so I kept that on there to reference where it originally came from. I'm not going to do a lot more stitching, I don't think. There is a little bit I'm still going to do, but then I'm going to sew these signatures together. I just have to make sure they're centered and lined up. They are pretty much lined up, but after handling them, they won't be perfect. And once they've had the pamphlet stitch done together, I'll be adding the covers. And I'll be doing it in a way, I think, that I've never done before. So we'll see how that goes. But I'm really liking how this is looking, and I really like how it looks when all the signatures are together like this too. They'll be more even than that, of course. And there's the back. So I've been spending way too much time on this because I've been enjoying it so much. So I've tried to take breaks, go outside, do some jobs outside, and do some other things like housework, which needs to be done sometimes. So I hope you enjoyed looking at that. I will do a full flip through when it's all put together. I have an interesting journal page to share with you. We had a different kind of exercise to do where we sewed by chance, and what Kathryn Chambers did on K3N Cloth Tales was to make a list of 6 things, put them on little pieces of paper in a container, and then you just pull out one piece of paper and whatever it says, that's what you do on the cloth. The tricky thing about it was that you had to put it back into the container, and there was a high chance that you would pull it out again. And that happened to me twice, as you'll see as I show you the page that I've made. But I tried to think of creative ways around that, and I think you'll find it interesting what I ended up with. As usual, I did really enjoy this exercise. It was a bit of a challenge. And you can see that my journal is nearly full because we're almost at the end of the year. We were asked to do prompts, as I mentioned, and the ones Kathryn suggested were tear, fold, weave and whole. And I actually got tear twice and weave twice. So my weave has 2 halves to it for both of the prompts. I tore 2 pieces of fabric for both of the tear prompts, and then they were my fold section as well. My bit of journaling that I put with it is this: life's path is not always straight, but it is more interesting. Sometimes too interesting, I think. And then underneath, I've written life's path. The 2 prompts that I didn't pull out were patch and seam. So I did do the patch by using the hole that I cut out. Thank you so much for joining me for this video. I've really enjoyed putting it together, and I hope you've enjoyed watching it. And until next time, take care, and I'll see you soon.